Good morning and welcome to Plain Speaking, the voice of the Democratic Party and its ideals and service to the country. I'm very happy to be in the august company of such a great panel. And the first panelist I want to introduce is a young woman who has just recently been elected as the chair of the Blair County Democratic Committee. And Gillian Kratzer, welcome, and congratulations on your ascendancy to the ominous position of chairman of the Blair County Democratic Committee. And I know, and I speak for the rest of the panel, we will certainly provide you with the same level of devotion and dedication and service as we did to the other person who was chairman, hopefully. But anyway, I am now the past chair of the party. And to my immediate right is George Thompson, of course, our treasurer, and ex-treasurer. That's right. You know, the old saying, "New broom sweeps clean," and Gillian's in the process. He's done some sweeping, but he hasn't gotten to the corners yet. But anyway, and to my far left, I love that word, is Tom Patterson, who is a very strong Democrat and certainly a very strong supporter of our shows. And of course, then to my far anti-right is Marsha Hunter, who has been on the program several times and certainly adds her expertise and knowledge to the topics we are presenting. We have a whole host of issues today, and as you well know, we'll never get to them all with the same degree of intensity that we'd like to, but we're going to start by taking a look at something I think is very important to all Blair Countyans, and that is the reassessment process for property that has finally been decided by the county commissioners as a necessary evil. And of course, as you know, they all ran on, we will not raise taxes. And as I've said all my life, politicians, when they say that, are absolute liars, L-I-A-R-S, because they know daggone well they cannot go from year to year to year without raising taxes. So, but when they say to the people, vote for me and I won't raise your taxes, well, it's going to happen. George, give us the skinny on this because, you know, there's been a lot of hearings, a lot of meetings. Where are we? Where do we stand?
Well, Blair County's been amazingly successful in not reassessing if you view that as a good thing. I personally don't, and I believe the results of the study that was made by the company that is doing the reassessment confirms what I'm saying. First of all, put this into perspective. 57 years ago was the last time properties in Blair County had an assessment.
And I think we're the only county in the state that's
the oldest. Yeah, we were the oldest, longest,
and dumbest.
And whatever. Now, this is important not only for the county, and I think that's one of the main reasons the county finally got motivated. They realized the county itself, its operations, heavily dependent on real estate taxes, and they had reached the cap. Now, there's a legal Pennsylvania-imposed cap on what you can charge a millage on the assessed value of properties, and since Blair County hadn't reassessed for 57 years, we needed to increase what the assessments were on the property so we could actually lower the millage. And that is one of the messages. I went to the at the convention center a few days back. They had a presentation on the results of this study and how reassessment's going to be implemented in Blair County. And one of the things that they stressed, because there's a lot of anxiety, it was a well-attended meeting. I guess people picture there's taxes going out of sight, and of course expressed in the Altoona Mirror and also on our local TV station. People got up and at the end of the meeting and expressed trepidation that old people and fixed incomes are going to be taxed out of their houses. And one of the messages in the meeting was that the state has anticipated this reaction, and in fact they do not allow an increase to exceed 10% of what your current taxes are. So that's one of the takeoffs of the meeting. Regardless of what the assessment is, Blair County actually can't increase its taxes. Now, when I say Blair County, just to remind everyone, property taxes affect what you pay to the county, to the school district, and then to your local municipality. And the municipality and county can increase their revenue, so to speak, from a reassessment more than 10% in the first year. Now, the school districts actually have another cap, and that is 2%. There can't be greater in the school district portion of your property tax an increase greater than 2%.
Now, is that in addition to the 10% that this county can raise?
No, it's just, the way I understood it, it's a 2% increase per year, is the way I understood it. Do you have information?
No, I'm just saying this seems incredulous that, you know, if the reassessment is going to limit the amount of taxes you can raise over a period of time, I thought they were going to try to get it in sync in a very short order. Yeah,
actually, to me, that was a little surprising, too, but I think I understand that's what they said. I may be wrong. It could be an addition. Wouldn't surprise me. But and for most people out there paying property taxes, actually, your school district tax is the greater of the property taxes anyway. Right. So that's actually one of the things that would really impact people. Now, one of the outtakes, though, of this presentation is how out of whack property assessments currently are compared to sale prices. And they gave at the meeting some rather shocking examples of where properties are when they looked at the sales price. They had a sales price ranged. Well, here I'm trying to find one where they have it sort of simple here. They looked at properties that sold currently in the last 3 years for $65,000, and the taxes that people paid on all of these houses are different, but the common denominator is they all recently sold for $65,000. So you would think the assessment would be basically the same. But it's not true. One of the properties, they were paying $116 in real estate taxes. Another property sold for the same price as that $116 property in taxes was paying $636 in taxes annually.
So how does this new law, or this ability, this reassessment process, how does that impact the lower and the topper end?
Well, what's going to happen here, if they do it properly and if everything works out the way it should, that $65,000 property, they would all be assessed at the same value.
So in other words, when the county commissioners came out at one meeting I was at, they said a general rule is 1/3 will get a reduction, 1/3 will stay the same, and 1/3 will go up.
And they kept saying that at this meeting at the convention center, and that's I'll just have to take it on faith that that's what's going to happen.
So under the scenario, say the 636 goes down and the 116 goes up.
Correct.
That's basically how it's going to work.
Correct, and it would go to an average in general. There's also at the meeting at the convention center, they also outlined different sectors of Blair County tend to be either overassessed or underassessed. And one of the people that attended the meeting, there was a question and answer period at the end, and the one fellow gets up and says, hey, Altoona's loaded with old people on fixed income. They just can't afford to pay any more taxes. But that fella wasn't paying attention because one of the things they said at the meeting is actually Altoona tends to be overassessed currently. In other words, you had, when the last assessment was taken in 1958, you had Altoona as a more prosperous community. Right. And so you had, and you didn't have the dilapidated houses that Altoona has back then. So over the years, the real estate prices have fallen in Altoona, but since the assessment hasn't changed, Altoona's higher 1958 prices just keep being forwarded into current.
So there's a strong possibility that if you're on a fixed income, you may come under one of these where yours actually goes down.
That's
Exactly.
basically what they were saying. On average, in Altoona, you would tend to end up with a lower reassessed value than one of the Frankstown Township was an example of. Back in '58, I guess their properties weren't worth that much, but the incomes have shifted, and so property in Frankstown Township
there's all kinds of
has
construction
increased
out
in
in those
value.
areas too.
Right.
Out in the Allegheny Township and Frankstown Township, all out throughout the county. I mean, those people, they're full of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and $600,000 homes now.
Yeah. And this is really a statewide issue. Blair County's managed not to reassess for years.
Now, they did raise the percentage of taxation from 75% to 100%.
Well, that
several
was
years ago.
Yeah, right.
But
yeah, and people didn't pay attention.
Yeah,
to that,
I know they
perhaps.
did. They did have that raised.
So when they did that, that increased the assessed value. It enabled them to they were sitting at 30 mills.
Yeah.
Which was the cap, and so when they went to 100% of the lowered 1958 assessment, I mean, this was like if you looked at your tax bill about 10 years ago, you didn't know you had this real low assessment, and it had no basis in reality. Now, actually, here in Blair County, currently, if someone's interested, maybe where they stand, currently, your assessed value, when you pull out your property taxes, your assessed value should be 16% of what they are saying your actual sales price would be. So you can take your assessed value, divide it by 0.16, and come up with what the state, what Blair County is saying your house is worth. And you can do that on your own and then match it up with what you think your house is actually worth. And that gives you some sort of feel whether you're over-assessed or under-assessed.
Yeah, but the bottom line is no one has any ability to have input into that. In other words, the county commissioners have voted to reassess. That process is now out of our hands. In other words, they're going to pay this group $3 million. They're going to come in and assess every single house in the county. So regardless of the inequities of where it is, how long it's been, what the issues are, we are going to be victims of whatever this group decides.
Well, that's true.
And so that the whole issue, and I hope the viewing audience understands that even though they have hearings and discussions, it's a fait accompli. That it's going to be done, and whatever changes are implemented, the voters will have no input, like a referendum or something like that. It is now a done deal.
Well, it's done, except you can appeal whatever assessment you end up with. You can appeal it, and in Bedford County, one of the counties that just recently had a reassessment. I guess 40% of the homeowners
that's right.
Appealed.
Wow.
I mean, it's a nightmare for the county commissioners and everyone.
Well, isn't this the same as the water authority? Didn't city council vote?
No, well, they have not made a final decision to do it. The leasing of that whole thing, and that's a little bit of a different story because, to place your fate on it for 50 years into somebody who says they're going to be transparent and they're going to be fair and equitable, that's a pretty big wish.
Right.
That's like I love you forever. The whole point is.
Yeah, one of the things driving the sale of the water authority, or the lease, not the sale, the lease, is there's not enough money to run the city of Altoona. And so this reassessment actually will impact that. I mean, it's going to enable the city, once this reassessment is done, to raise their taxes essentially 10%, and they probably will. I mean, you don't need to raise it 10%. What they communicated is there's a cap. They can't raise it more than 10%.
Right.
But
and is that per year?
Per year, and then each year, I see, and I'm not sure about that either. Each year after that, then they can continue to increase your taxes. And I'm not sure how that actually does work. If it's another 10%, I mean, that can add up real fast.
And that doesn't require a vote from the municipalities or the school districts each year to do it. Is it automatic?
No. The city council has to say they need the money and vote for a millage increase.
It's okay to say they need it, but let's say we better prove it.
Well, that's actually...
Look at the streets and the roads, though. I mean, for the Lord's sake, if you ever...
Yeah.
Okay, and we're diverging from George's presentation.
Well, no,
they do intertwine because...
Absolutely. All this is interrelated. The school district is short of money for two reasons. They haven't been able to tax more because of our low assessments. But the state has continued to underfund.
Yeah, they should.
So the school districts are left in a real bind. I mean, they have
and underfund the pensions. The state underfunded the pensions for years and years.
Well, yeah. So many of these things, of course, are interrelated. I mean, we're taking them as a single topic, but all of this reassessment issue impacts the school districts, the city, and Blair County. I mean, I think in the end, Blair County's problem was what drove this. They simply looked at what their expenses were and said, we can't continue without getting a reassessment.
And you'd have thought over the years that the people who sat on those county commissioner boards should have known that, and they deliberately...
Oh, I'm thinking our current Senator Eichelberger, that was one of his crying cards, to get reelected as senator. He was sitting as Blair County Commissioner, no taxes. And as we talked about previously, they weren't putting any money into the county pension fund.
That's right.
And as we're discovering roof repairs, capital improvements.
Yeah, but they want to put a tarp over it now? Yeah. Do you see that in the paper? They want to put a big tarp over it for the...
So I think people need to be reminded this no new taxes. Sometimes maybe it's okay if there's all this waste out there, government doing things that no one cares about, but sometimes government is actually doing things that are necessary, and if there's no new taxes, those things might be impacted.
I compare it to a home. If you own a house and you don't do a single thing to it for 57 years, what is going to be the condition of that house today versus 57 years ago? And the people who sit out here and say, no new taxes, it's like saying, I own a home, but I'll be darned if I'm going to do anything to keep it modern and keep it from leaking. I don't understand the reasoning.
Well, actually, this issue came up at the meeting. The assessors that are coming around, really their job is to measure property, the dimensions from the outside. They're not actually going to go inside the house. Well, anyone who buys real estate knows that that's rather important to know
what you can have nothing in there.
Yeah, you don't buy the picture of the house.
So they're probably picking up maybe additions that no one knew about at the county, and adding that. I don't know, what marching orders they've been given. Actually, I've already had the assessors at my house. I guess where I live is one of the first areas.
Did you invite him in?
Yeah.
Oh, George. You're going to be one of the uppies.
Actually, you have an opportunity, though. They hand you a little piece of paper, and it basically is asking you to complete this piece of paper saying how many bathrooms you have in the house, whether you have fireplaces. They also want to know if it's been remodeled, if it has, the year that it was remodeled. So, I don't know what they expect the people to do. I mean, you can, as I'm telling this, think about what people actually are going to do. Another issue, 27% of the properties in Blair County actually are rentals.
I was going to ask, how does that affect
renters?
Well,
they said that any property that has 4 units, 4 renters in it, they're going to send that piece of paper where we complete the information to the owner of the house. But if it's a rental that just is like 1 or 2 families in, they're actually going to give, I don't know how they would do it if there's 2 families. They're going to put the piece of paper on the doorknob or hand it to whoever answers the door. And then I guess they're expected to fill out. And unless you've been a long-term renter, which odds are pretty low that you've been there a long time, I mean, you're going to have no concept whether a thing has been remodeled, and certainly what year it's been remodeled. So they're sort of fudging a little bit. They're saying, well, we're not getting in the property inside, but they're sort of trusting the honesty of people to say on that piece of paper what's really happening.
Well, it would seem to be a little bit of a dilemma if you have an apartment complex where, say, there are 8 renters, and one of them gets this thing in the no doorknob saying we want to And will they make a determination of that whole 8 units based on what that one person said, without even consulting the owner of the place?
Well, that was the issue, and there's also a little code that one of the selling points of this, there's a website set up. Once they start having these appraisals come in, you're going to have access to your own property's information, and there's a code on a piece of paper with a password. You can log into a website and, get this information. But one of the problems, there were landlords there, of course, since landlords tend to be really interested in this whole thing.
Yeah.
And they were saying, well, hey, you're going to hand this out to my tenant. How do I even get the code? Because the code's on the piece of paper. How do I even get the code for the house that I actually own? And
see, that's what I'm thinking. The information is going to be kind of convoluted in its trail up the ladder, because if you let all of your tenants make a determination of what's in and all that one apartment may be a little bit better than the others down the.
What happens when your tenant knows how much the property is worth and gets to think about the worth of the property versus what they're paying in rent?
Well, see, that's I'll tell you. Well, I know there are a lot of issues there, George, and I know that we're going to be calling on you again in the future to continue to reaffirm the information we have. But in order to get into some other topics, is there anything that you want to say right now?
Well, I'll just conclude. Whatever happens, the first that you're going to find the reassessed value is July 1st of 2016. So this is still a little way off. So and you're right, we'll be talking about this, I'm sure, beyond 2016, because if Bedford County holds as the example, it wasn't until 2016 that all the people realized, well, this is what my assessment is, now I'm going to go and appeal it. So we'll be talking about this for a number of years.
Well, and we would encourage the viewers, if you are involved in any of this process at the early stages and you are contacted and you get the information, you might want to share it with one of us. I'm sure most of our names are in the phone book. You can look us up in the phone book and maybe call and give us some information, because we will have difficulty, other than what George does, to get the information we would all need, and there's no sense in 5 of us digging when we have his strong back and arms to dig.
Well, actually, you don't need to listen to what I say. What I'm reading from is actually available on the Blair County website, and I know, Tom, you also printed this out.
Yeah, it's blairco.org.
And you go on there, it's the home page, and there's actually a link, reassessment.
Okay.
And click on that, and they have several.
Well, they have several sites on there. They do a snapshot of the reassessment process, then the in-depth, which is the one that we printed out. But blairco.org.
Okay. All righty, well, we'll be moving on. Today we're only going to take one break, and I know our payers would like to have more, but we have a whole lot of topics, so we'll take our first break at 9:30. But at this point, I think we can take a look at the next issue on the block, and that very much impacts, again, the whole county, because it's the Altoona Water Authority, and even though it's Altoona Water Authority in name, we do serve several of the municipalities beyond the city limits of Altoona. And I think the biggest issue is, and everyone I'm sure is aware, that the city wants to seriously consider leasing the operation of the Altoona water and sewer, by the way. It's just not water, although it's part of that process. But they want to lease it to a company for 50 years. Now, we have, Gillian, have you done some thoughtful research in this?
I've been keeping up with it in the paper and looking into it, and there was actually a really interesting article last Sunday, I want to say, that went over some of the history of why these things are becoming an issue. So it used to, quite a long time ago, prior to the 30s in Pennsylvania, a city like Altoona could annex neighboring municipalities in exchange for then, providing them with public utilities. That law was changed, and so now third-class cities can't do that anymore. So we, sell them water, these neighboring municipalities, but we cannot expand, and then they're not part of the Altoona tax base, and so they're not paying into the system, but we are putting water out to them.
And if they would expand the number of homes in the area, like some of these municipalities are building home after home after home, and that the city has no recourse to increase the taxable amount they pay into it.
Now, the leasing the water, I think the outlying municipalities are concerned that the bill is going to go up, and probably rightly so, because frankly, I do not see, and this has been pointed out certainly by the solicitor from the Altoona Water Authority, how, right now they are solvent, they're doing fine. How is this company going to come in and not want to make a profit? And in order to do that, how do they not increase, water rates? So the people in the neighboring municipalities are asking for representation on the Altoona Water Authority board. And the city does not want to give that up.
Because they are appointed by city council. And in fact, to the best of my knowledge, they're one of the, if not the only one, but one of very, very few who actually get a monthly stipend for serving on that commission.
Well, and you were talking about that it would make logical sense that everyone's bill would go up because they need to make a profit.
Right.
What about the quality of the water? Who's going to do the quality assurance on the water once it's been privatized? They have no interest in doing anything but making a profit.
Right, exactly.
They're not interested in making sure that the water quality remains at the proper standards. It's just like anything with privatization. When you privatize something that's for the public good and for the public safety, and you privatize that, then you make money the primary goal of that company. It's not to provide good water pressure at reasonable rates. It's to get as much money out of each consumer as you can.
Absolutely.
And you don't worry about the quality of the water.
Now that's a good point,
either.
because when, as you recall, about 10 or 15 years ago, the city wanted to consider selling it. And there was a commission appointed, and Judge Milliron was the chairman, and I was one of the members of that commission. And we interviewed 4 different international corporations about the whole process, and one of the issues was about the quality of our water. And by the way, the quality and the way that the Altoona Water Authority guarantees the quality of the water is among the highest, most efficient, effective in the whole country. So we do have the best water that money can buy.
Right.
And the thing is, though, and I said this to the people, one of the last questions I asked them when we interviewed them, well, what happens then to the quality of service? Well, we'll maintain that. And I said, well, what happens? How many companies do you own? They would tell us. And, well, what happens if there's a catastrophe in Alabama, the company you own, and there's a multi-million-dollar? Do you spread that cost around to the whole system? Yes, they do.
Sure.
So when you lease it, you're going to do the same thing.
Yeah, you're at the mercy of the financial stability of the company.
Right. And for 50 years,
the whole operation, not just Altoona.
That's right, and for 50 years.
And there are always loopholes to these sorts of privatization schemes. If you look at places like, I believe it was Chicago, who privatized their parking meters.
Yes, I read that.
Okay, so parking meters are there, and you pay for them. Sometimes the city will close down a street, say for a parade or construction, and then people don't use the parking meters. Well, that's fine if your city owns the parking meters, but under this private company, there is a clause in the contract that says if you close down the street, the city has to pay for the money that private company is losing by not having people parking on the street. And so they're actually losing money on this deal. And, you have to look for these sorts of loopholes when you look at privatization.
Well, one of the concerns I personally have is Altoona's water lines have been around for a long time, and, of course, the city occasionally is forced to replace them when there's breaks.
Yeah.
In fact, and I don't know, maybe since you were on that water authority, Frank, there was a report in the Altoona Mirror maybe 10 years ago that 50% of the water that comes out of the reservoirs, they meter the water coming out of the reservoirs, never ended up registered on the home meters. In other words, there was a projected 50% loss of water because of leakage.
That's exactly right.
And that's never really been, I don't know, has that been resolved?
No, it has not, because what it would require is a massive, multi-billion-dollar refurbishing of the whole system. because I mean, there's not a day goes by in this city that I don't see the Altona Water Authority digging up some street somewhere in order to repair all of these leaks and that. And there's, I don't know how you would monitor them. I don't know what kind of process there is involved. We never get into that.
Well, no, we did. And then, like you say, once who's going to dig up the street? Is it going to be this new leased company?
Yeah.
And then when they do, right now, the city actually uses staff to come and redo the roads.
And then they got to repave eventually too.
So I mean, there has to be some mechanism there for the city to get reimbursed for digging that the authority would do. And then let's talk about the sewer lines, because a large section of the city, actually the storm sewers and the sanitary sewers, have never been separated. And so that's another issue, and the way they've compensated for this. Well, last night we just got a gigantic downpour, at least where I live, and my basement started flooding because there was such a volume of water that it just was, I think, backing up, actually, from the sewer line, I think.
Well, and it's true you say that, because, you know, even in my basement, and this happened several years ago, the water actually saturated the ground so much that it actually came up through the concrete, and I couldn't believe that could be done. And I called in 3 different basement experts in this whole area, and they said that concrete is porous enough, even though it's set there for 30 years, that when there was so much water underneath, it forces its way up through. So I mean, and it happened, you know, to us before, that there was no place where it was coming in where we could see it coming in, but yet it actually seeped up through. And when you have these horrendous storms, you know.
Well, and the city was forced to put in gigantic holding tanks at different locations throughout the city, because when you have these big storms and the sewer lines are not separated, in other words, the water running down the street and into a storm sewer, in many sections of the city, that just goes right into the sanitary sewer. And, you know, before, the city was just dumping all this water because they couldn't do anything else. The sewage treatment plant just doesn't have the capacity to treat all of this water all at once. So the solution was to build these gigantic holding tanks where, when this storm situation happens, all the water goes in the holding tank, and then the sewage treatment plant slowly treats it and before it releases it into the streams. And we were mandated to do that. I mean, and I guess it's still a problem in many areas.
You see, these are the issues. We're going to take a break right now, 1 second here, but these are the issues that the people don't understand. It's easy for the councilman to say, this is a gigantic influx of money, and we're going to get rid of all of our pension deficits and everything else, but what's the long-term impact on the citizens, you know, and the quality and the quantity of the water? I mean, we're not talking about that. We're just trying to save the butts of people who maybe over the last 30, 40 years weren't diligent enough to take a look at long-term to see what we had to do to make sure this didn't happen.
Well, to get to Gillian's point, $180 million is the anticipated minimum that some company's going to pay to run our water system for 50 years. $180 million, and their estimate might be $220 million.
But then what's it going to cost us in the long run?
You know, they got to make that money up.
Well, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back, and we certainly have some interesting commentary. Stay with us.
My Jamie, she was my baby girl, my precious baby girl. When Jamie was a teenager, she would spend her lunch hours going to the tanning salons. I didn't realize how dangerous they were. If you tan when you're young, your risks for melanoma are increased by 75%. That's huge. What I would say to mothers that allow their daughters to tan, no mother should have to visit their daughter in a cemetery. 1 person an hour dies from melanoma. Jamie's hour was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, March 16th, 2007. I hope no one else has to mark their hour.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Two young spenders named Tommy and Sue. Their parents let them buy whatever they chose, like video games and designer clothes. As they grew older, they spent all their pay on fancy cars, houses, 2 lattes a day. They lived in the moment, never saving a dime. When they tried to retire, they'd run out of time. Working forever is Tom and Sue's fate, so choose to save now before it's too late. Visit our website to find out more, because a happy ending's worth saving for.
Too, because he's hiding. Welcome back, and we certainly had a little lively discussion on the break, but we're going to close off our discussion of the leasing, or the proposed leasing, of the Water Authority with one quick comment from each of the panelists, and we're going to move on then to the Pennsylvania state budget. Any closing comment about?
Well, one unaddressed issue, at least I haven't been able to find any information. Let's not forget that Altoona, a bunch of things are happening right now. One of the things is the new charter that's been meeting, and actually they've drawn up a new charter that if you go into altoonapa.gov, the new charter is a link sitting there.
altoonapa.gov, folks.
But it also is in the middle of Act 47, meaning the state has come in, basically said to Altoona, I think, we're taking over some of these decisions here. We're going to tell you what we think should be done, and we expect implementation. Now, the thing I don't know about with this water system, does Altoona actually have a choice whether to lease this or not? Because I get the feeling that this is being pushed by the people that come in from Harrisburg, the Act 47 people, and I haven't been able to really find out, what is driving this thing.
So our advice to the council would be stop right now and find out answers to all these questions before you impose on us a decision to lease our water and sewer
Well, I think it should be addressed. I mean, as voters, we should know what is driving this thing.
And what is the connection between this particular company and Harrisburg?
Well, that's another...
we don't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
Whose campaign are they funding?
I'll tell you.
It might be somebody.
Well, anyway. let us move on. We're going to talk about the state of Pennsylvania now, and you talk about a mess when it comes to conditions that are existing and votes that are being taken, etc. But right now we're looking at the budget. June 30 is the deadline. Now, Corbett has proudly said all these past 3 years that his budget's been done on time. But guess what's happening now? It's not going to be ready. And why? It's those darn governmental employees and their pension plans. He's holding up the budget on that. Commentary here from the folks on the budget, the state of where we are.
He's absolutely holding the budget hostage over this pension reform thing. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. We've got so much going on. He, doesn't want to do the severance tax, although there's now bipartisan support for the severance tax in the legislature. He doesn't want to expand Medicaid.
That's hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, but for some reason he feels that this pension reform that he's put forward, this hybrid plan where it would be part pension and part 401k, is, I don't know, the magic bullet that's going to cure all our budget woes. I don't see it.
I don't. Tom?
Well, here's something interesting from the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center on Marcellus Shale, that their tax payments are down to pre-Marcellus levels despite booming production. They actually are paying less in corporate income tax now than they were when they started.
Well, and there's the budget. That's part of the budget shortfall. Part of it is not the expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare and refusing that money. Refusing it.
Yeah, that's hundreds of billions of dollars.
I know.
A billion.
When you've got the hospital associations want the state to take that money, it lowers the costs of hospitals. It's good for the state, but because of a philosophical difference, he doesn't want to do it. And then the other thing that you were bringing up with, now I forget what he said.
Marcellus Shale.
Marcellus Shale. He is not taxing Marcellus Shale. Very successful company. We don't want to tax them out of business, but we want them to pay their fair share. And this is another instance where they were very supportive of his campaign and probably
they're still very supportive.
To be,
they do.
And he does not want to tax them because he's getting money for his campaign from that company?
Well, here's right from the industry analysts looked at how severance tax would impact gas growers and concluded that Marcellus shale gas is so inexpensive to produce and so close to premium markets that most regions' producers are making well above the 15% internal rate of return.
Now, that's criminal.
And it says that the point is that severance tax drilling in Marcellus shale will remain too attractive for drillers to ignore, even with the severance tax.
Well, and this hostage situation you're talking about, it started with the federal government.
Yeah.
The federal government didn't want to pass a budget. Oh, unless we get rid of Obamacare, we're not going to pass a budget. Well, you see how successful that was for the Republicans.
Yeah.
Eric Cantor can't even win a primary. I mean, it's not the way to govern.
No.
By, if you want to look at pension reform in a democratic process, by having the House and the Senate look at it, that's the democratic process. Those are the people that were voted by the constituents, whether I agree with them or not, and that's the target you take. You don't have, you talk about being an imperialistic president. This is being an imperialistic governor where he is refusing to have a budget because he's just stomping his feet and going home and saying, unless you do something about this, I'm not even going to address the problems that he, of course, has created through not accepting Medicaid and not accepting, taxing Marcellus shale at a rational rate.
Well, this is all ideological as far as the refusal to accept Medicare expansion, Medicaid expansion. And I went to a town hall meeting that our Representative McGinnis had,
and there's a guy.
And I did ask the question because he was saying how the state doesn't have enough revenue this year, and his explanation why it doesn't is he said, well, the capital gains rate the prior year at the federal level was still 15%, and the state just projected that all these capital gains sales would occur in this current fiscal year, but they raised the capital gains rate to 20%. So he's saying people then sell their stock or whatever, could be rental properties, different assets that would get capital gains rate. This is John McGinnis's explanation why the state has this revenue shortfall. Well, I brought up to him, I said, well, Governor Corbett refuses to accept this Medicaid expansion, and the Pennsylvania Economy League, the Rand Corporation, and this actually an independent office within Pennsylvania, the IFO, has all projected that if you would just accept the 100% reimbursement from the Obamacare Medicaid expansion, you would save $500 million.
What did he say?
Well, what he said, that's not really true because that is only good for 3 years, and after that, he said that you don't get anything.
Well, what about right now? What about right now?
Well, first of all, that statement was absolutely wrong, and it was even shocking that he would say that because after 3 years, it goes from 100% to 90. Well, it doesn't drop immediately to 90. It actually drops in steps, and after 10 years, it goes to 90%.
Right, after 10 years.
And it made for people, they may not understand, how could we give medical coverage to these people and save $500 million? It doesn't make sense. Well, the way it makes sense is, guess what, folks?
We're already paying for it.
We already paid for medical care for all sorts of programs. I mean, we're not letting people in America die on the street before Obamacare. A lot of these medical services were rendered. The big one would be general assistance. They would already render care at costing $277 million. Now, this is from the Independent Fiscal Office in Pennsylvania, where I'm getting this information. The hospitals get $48 million in what they call uncompensated care. You go to the emergency room, you don't have any money, hospital treats you. Well, guess what? They try to collect, but if the people have no money, they end up collecting nothing.
That's why the hospitals are for the expansion of Medicaid.
Yeah.
That's exactly why the hospitals are for it, because they're getting nothing now.
Yeah.
They're getting absolutely nothing, and they have to care for people. They can't just send people away if they're ill, and you wouldn't want them to.
Certainly not.
And the thing that we have to impress upon the viewers, too, you can do something about this. Get on the horn. Get on the internet. Get on the pen and pencil. Get a hold of McGinnis and Eichelberger and Judy Ward, who's now going to go down there to Harrisburg and represent the rest of Blair County. Let them know what you think. Because each of these two of them, Eichelberger and McGinnis, are absolutely opposed to everything George is saying. That this gift from the government, they're thumbing their nose at that, and they're causing us to pay a heck of a lot more. Get a hold of these people.
Yeah, and it's not George saying it. This is organizations that usually they listen to. The Pennsylvania Economy League, usually the Republicans listen to them. And they're saying it. I mean, this is just unbelievable that Governor Corbett would expand, and he's trying to, of course, expand it under his own terms.
And Marcellus Shale is not going to leave the state if they are taxed at a fair and equitable rate, which they are not right now, because they're being taxed in every other state that they're doing this drilling in.
Yeah.
Every other state.
That is absolutely true. We are one of the only, maybe the only state with this kind of natural resource that doesn't impose this kind of a tax. And you'll hear from Republicans, I mean, Lieutenant Governor Cawley, Mike Turzai, the rallying cry is if we tax these people even 5%, the industry will collapse. They'll leave the state and take the jobs away. What are they going to do? Are they going to pick up the natural gas out of the ground and go home? No, it's in our ground.
Right.
It's our resource.
They're not going to leave the 15% profit that they normally would get just because they're going to be taxed another 5%.
Yeah.
Well, what people don't realize is Marcellus Shale drilling, this just isn't like a well driller coming to your house and sinking a well.
Right.
Yeah, there's millions and millions of dollars in equipment that have to be moved in and set up, and there's no company going to make that kind of investment and pick it up out of the ground and leave the next month. They have to recover their expenses.
Well, in fact, most states, and Pennsylvania's analysis also says this, the Independent Fiscal Office, again, they've done an analysis of the Marcellus Shale potential tax, and they've concluded the same thing we're all saying, that the tax that currently is imposed on the industry, even if you take into account the corporate tax, which actually John McGinnis said, well, they pay other taxes. He's sort of poo-pooing the thing. Well, if you take all these other taxes into account, actually they're still paying less than other states.
That's exactly
so they have no place to go. Right now we're the low-tax state, and so we could increase it, but where I was going with this is it's a little more complicated. I mean, the gas that's near an existing natural gas pipeline, boy, the industry wants to drill. That's one of the reasons they've been drilling up in the northeast part of Pennsylvania. They haven't really drilled so much down in our area, and because they need a pipeline. You just can't drill. You have to get it to market, and so if there's expenses involved in putting natural gas line
you'll need a pipeline.
Usually most severance taxes take all of this into account, that there are expenses, and not all gas in one place is the same as gas in another. Now, to dumb it down, I mean, all the candidates don't talk about all these complicated things. They just say, well, 10%, which is, of course, what McCord was saying. Tom Wolf, our duly in the primary Democrat governor candidate, he was saying 5%. But the reality is it gets a little more complicated if you look at a lot of the details. But the bottom line is we aren't taxed as much as any other state.
That's exactly right.
Right, and we're at a big budget shortfall, and that's part of the reason.
And they're blaming it now on the pension funds, which are the defined benefit plans.
Right.
And if you look at what the one senator, it's not Turzai, but it's a T somebody, that is coming up with this proposal that we would reduce the payout for the defined benefit plan, and then for new employees and future employees that there will be a 401k plan thrown in. But again, that is open to the market.
It's unstable.
It's unstable, and who's going to manage that money anyway? You're going to be paying somebody exorbitant management fees in order to take care. How many people can afford to run their own 401k?
Well, and this is just like the VA. The recent things coming up with the VA. You know, the state's answer, the Republicans' answer in the state with for pensions is to have a 401k. What happens when you have a 401k? You're going to have a private financial manager for that 401k.
Yes.
So that's giving money to private businesses right there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
There's number one. Okay, number two, now in the House and the Senate, what the new answer is to the VA backlog is not to give more money to the VA that you took under the sequester, that you took out of, instead of that, if they don't get into the VA within 30 days because you've underfunded the VA and there's not enough physicians and nurses to take care of these people, then if they don't get an appointment within 30 days, they can go to the private sector.
And that's the whole idea.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. They don't mind taking taxes and giving it to the private sector. They have no problem in doing that whatsoever because that is their constituent base.
And by the way, part of the uninsured thing that Governor Corbett is not opted into, the expanded Medicaid, guess what? Veterans fall into that category.
That's right.
Exactly right.
And so they're not getting care at the VA system. And we could be having them get medical care through the expanded Medicaid, and he's refusing to expand it right now.
I made a statement one time, and I wish I could find where it is. Gillian and I talked about this because she wanted to use it in one of her papers, but Governor Corbett did say, and if any of you can try to find somewhere where we can get it, he did say to the Pennsylvania public that take a look at your yellow pages in your phone book, and if you see any company there that can provide one of the services that is provided by the state of Pennsylvania, let me know and we'll privatize that service for that private company. Now, I know he said that because I heard him say it, but I can't remember when and where. And so if any of you in your searching of different things, outrageous commentary and so on, but I know he said that, and I just...
Well, forget about Governor Corbett. Alex, the American Legislation Exchange Council, which advises rights legislation to give to basically conservative legislators to implement privatization. I mean, they've said it. I mean, there's different bills that if you go into their website, they have pre-made legislation. You know, if you are a newly elected legislator, just go to their website and they'll have legislation on certain topics and privatize.
Okay, we know the government in Pennsylvania is in dire financial straits, but the way the governor is trying to find solutions is absolutely unacceptable. I want to hit into the minimum wage thing because I want to make one comment about that. In this guy down in Virginia, 7th District, where Harry Cantor lost to this Dr. Bratt, who's an economist. He was on Morning Joe, and somebody brought up the minimum wage, and he said he would be willing to support a minimum wage that would be comparable to the increase in productivity of the people working. In other words, if the productivity went up, then he would support the minimum wage going up.
Do you not understand that productivity has gone up?
That's what I was going to say.
200%.
Yes, what happened, Chris Matthews last night had the graph, and it showed the productivity increase 239% over the last X number of years, and the wage, the minimum wage, has gone up, all wages have gone up 109%. So there is a doubling of the productivity and cutting the minimum wage increase back down in relation to it. So Chris Matthews said last night, you've got to come on this show and admit you were wrong. Because that was his whole thesis. He was supporting minimum wage if it matched the productivity.
And it doesn't at this point.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons that Eric Cantor lost, supposedly, because this guy sounds like a populist. And a lot of the voters in Eric Cantor's district, congressional district, viewed him as representing the corporations, not them, the people. And so I could see if this guy is saying this, opponent who won is saying these things, why the people might have supported him. But what you're saying is his words don't match.
Right. In fact, I got on to Huffington the day right after he was elected, and you can't believe some of the things he said. He wants to get rid of Social Security, cut 2/3 of the benefits, and he wants to get rid of the IRS and all. But this morning on the shows, his campaign manager erased all of that information on their website, all of his commentary.
Sure.
Now he's backtracking on that. But anyway, I know that's...
Hey, no new taxes. We've heard that one before.
Well, here's the thing. Here's what's happened.
Okay, Marsha.
I don't know how long this has been going on or when this originally started or whatever you want to call it. But the Republicans have been very, very successful in demonizing taxes because nobody wants more taxes taken out of their paycheck. This is a natural thing. But the problem is you're not getting paid enough. The problem is not that the government is the bad guy, because you want your roads fixed.
Sure.
You want your police.
Education.
You want education. Everybody says, oh, the kids are the future. Well, put your money where your mouth is. The thing about the minimum wage is this. If you are making more money, you can pay a little bit in taxes and it's not going to hurt you. The bad guy is not the government. The bad guy is the owner of the corporation that while your productivity has gone up 200%, your wages haven't, and he's pocketing the difference.
That money.
He is pocketing the difference. So if we went around in Blair County and asked the man on the street, would you like your wages to be higher than they are now? I would imagine at least 51% of Blair County would say yes. The people of Blair County need to go to people like McGinnis and Eichelberger and Judy Ward, because she's running unopposed.
And opposed to minimum wage.
And all of them are opposed to the minimum wage.
Yeah.
And that you need to tell them that you want the minimum wage raised in Pennsylvania like it's being raised in 21 other states right now. There is legislation in Harrisburg right now for raising the minimum wage, from Patty Kim from Harrisburg and from Cohen from Philadelphia, but it's not going anywhere. It's stuck in committee.
And it will be, because Republicans control all the legislation.
We also have to look at organizations like the National Restaurant Association, the other NRA, is fighting tooth and nail against these minimum wage raises because they don't want the tipped minimum wage to go up, which at the federal level is $2.13 an hour. And, you know, there are actually restaurants, there's sort of a small and growing movement of restaurant owners who have stopped tipping in the restaurants, and they're raising the wages. So there's a place, and I think Progress just had a really good article about it the other day, about a restaurant that has raised their minimum wage for all of their workers to $10 an hour. And then rather than tipping, they have a sales commission. So their workers can make up to $15 an hour. But let's say they're on a slow shift, they're making $10 an hour minimum. And here, that's not happening. Pennsylvania's tipped minimum wage is $2.83 an hour.
Yeah.
And, you know, these people are working really hard. And, you know, this $2.83 is meant to be, you know, worked up to the $7.25 an hour. But it's not.
And the minimum wage is not kids.
No, it's not.
The average age of the
not.
person that's on minimum wage is over 20, and the minimum wage is also not small business. 80% of people making the minimum wage are working for corporations.
Right. And how many older folks are saying, getting these jobs at minimum wage because they can't afford to live on what they're getting now? You know, we got the 1 minute sign, folks. I'm telling you, I just wish we had 2 hours. You know, but you've been excellent, you know, and we've tried to keep the commentary, you know, closely guarded so that we get all the information out. But we will be back in several weeks, and we're going to have, obviously, a stellar panel again. And I do want to thank you all for watching. And I do want you to remember that our new Blair County Democratic Chair is Gillian Kratzer. And you can get a hold of her by calling the number that used to be back up here, 944-9924, 944-9924. Thanks for watching, and we will see you shortly.